Hello everybody, welcome back to another game of Rory's Story Cubes. Today I've zoomed in a little bit on the desktop here, the table, so hopefully the dice will be bigger and we'll have more space for you to look at. First of all, of course, I'm going to grab 9 dice. I'm just going to grab the first ones that I've got right here. That's already 5, 7, and the last 2 are these 2. There we go. Now I'm going to roll them and see what we get. And these go off to the side for a bit. Here we go, the first 4. Incoming. Hoppa. So last time I was like down here below the camera, now I'm going to put them a little bit higher. Hopefully we'll see these. It should be okay. I set up like a little thing here. A makeup brush, as a matter of fact, to denote the edge of the the viewing area. First things first though, I'm going to change the lighting a little bit. There we go. This is one of those things that you use to look at a microscope. There you go. A tower, a temple gate once again, and a bottle of poison. Alrighty then. Next 5. Hoppa. Somebody who does not look happy. A submarine, wheel, and a helmet. And over here we have what looks like a rocket ship of some sort. Move them over a little bit. And a well, and once again, now that I have everything lined up, I'll just get this hair in the way, kind of nasty. You can take a look if you can come up with your own stories, and make sure to pause here and leave your comments below with your stories in them, of course. Now let's go see what I can make out of this, because it's kind of random. But it looks like we're going to be doing a lot of traveling once again. We're going to start with this guy, because he's the most obvious victim of our story. This is Bob. Once again, there's a lot of people named Bob, but it's just a very common and useful name. Bob was a warrior, and he had fought in Japan many centuries ago, but he turned out to be immortal because he had once found a wishing well and made a wish that he would be immortal and nobody on the battlefield could best him. So eventually he ended up conquering a tower somewhere, actually in Normandy, because he was immortal and he had time to travel around. And he was the boss of that for a very long time, until science caught up with him. The world around him evolved. He was still the warrior from before, so he wasn't quite sure what was going on around him. He had no idea of technology. All he knew was fighting and occasionally winning and losing, although losing not so much in the dying sense, because he was immortal, obviously. Could not be harmed. And after a while, people started to notice him sitting there in this tower all by himself, because he was like a bit of a prominent figure over there. I mean, how many people do you know that are several thousand years old? And they were initially in the early 20th century looking for somebody to test like these early submarines on, because they were trying to invent them. They had several runs before, but they wanted to make sure that this was a safe one, and they stuck them on a submarine, and they were like, you can get some extra gold for this. Like, gold is something you still use, right? Or copper or septums or whatever it is that you have as a currency. And he says, well, that sounds cool. I want to know what's underwater. I read Jules Verne somewhere along the way, and I want to see the 20,000 miles leagues beneath the sea. Not miles. They didn't have miles down there. They got leagues and knots and all that sort of thing. So he went down there and he had quite an adventure. And after he came back, he didn't have to take some medicine, because he came out too fast, and that does something with your lungs and it's terrible and all that sort of thing. But they were also testing a cure for that, and he drank that, didn't die. Didn't have a very good time of it either, but as you can see, he's not very happy. Still, though, he survived because he's immortal. But they were able to measure the effects of both the coming out or living in a submarine for a while and coming up too fast, and of course the antidote that they had discovered, quote unquote, which turned out to be not very much of an antidote, but rather a poison, and they could follow the effects in his body nicely without him actually dying. So they made the perfect test subject, or guinea pig, whatever you'd like to call that. Anyway, so after a few more years, they were starting a space program, and eventually they went to the moon, but they didn't want him for that, because that was very expensive stuff that they needed to work with. I didn't want them to waste it, or him to waste it, because he'd never actually even sat behind a computer before, which at that time was still like a whole room full of machines. Many years later, though, they decided that they wanted to send somebody to Mars to see if the atmosphere, or if there was an atmosphere. And they figured, what better person to send to Mars to build a base than this guy, naturally. So he agreed, once again, because he was really into adventuring. He thought it would be kind of like going in the submarine and coming back and drinking some poison and all that sort of thing. He had no idea he would never come back. and see his lovely tower again. They didn't tell him that because they thought that maybe he wouldn't want to do it after all, but he agreed and he was sent up into space to Mars. At least that was the original calculation, and they had a few problems there. The person who calculated the trajectory was an intern at NASA, and he actually gave him a few more degrees to the left than he needed to, and eventually ended up not landing on Mars at all, but on some other planet, maybe Pluto. Pluto is still a planet, right? Or has it become a planet again? Is it still not a planet? I have no idea. They might be considering making it a planet once again, who knows. Anyway, he was on Pluto, the maybe not planet, and he wasn't very happy about that because there wasn't much else going on over there. There wasn't much of an atmosphere to breathe, I suppose, but he was immortal, though he had no idea how to control these vehicles or even use the communication device. He was stuck there forever, until of course sometime in the future when somebody decided to come and get him because they had evolved, mankind eventually, fortunately, to actually be able to travel through space somewhat economically, and they finally went and got him, and then they brought him back to his tower on Earth because everybody else was leaving Earth anyway, so he had the entire Earth himself with nobody around, which made him kind of lonely, but at least he was back in his tower, being the Japanese warrior that he had always been back in the day. So kind of all's well ends well, even though it was many thousands of years later. So that was the first story. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to put these aside so they don't get picked a second time today. Hopefully we'll get some more variation in the stories that way. I'm going to go and grab 9 more dice for the next one. That makes a lot of noise. This should be the first 5. Yep, there. Oh, one of the animalia ones. I haven't had those before. Well, at least not many, huh? I need 4 more dice. I have 5 of them in my hand now. Nope, 4. There you go. And we're gonna roll some, and then we're gonna talk some. Let's see. Oops, that went a little bit too far. Let's see, this is a tower over here, a puzzle piece, and that could be anything. Some type of liquid splattering all over the place. This is a medical kit. First aid kit. Next 5. Up. A tiger, because if you have a tiger you need a medkit. A crown, alrighty then, and this looks like the boat guy, the gondolier guy from the River Styx. This is a wheelchair and an owl. Well, very good. Pause the video here once again to make up your own story and make sure to post it in the comments below because that is fun to read. I'd like to see what people come up with the same dice that I'm using. So, there we are then. There's no particular character I could use. I don't want to start with the animals necessarily unless I have to, and I don't have to. I'm going to say, once upon a time, there was somebody who lived way at the top in the penthouse of a very tall building, and he was a king in his own realm. Not necessarily, actually, he was the retired postal worker who had a good benefits or severance package, and that's made him feel like he was king because he was able to save up some extra money and buy a nice flat, and he hadn't really any bother. Nobody bothered him, actually, that's what I'm trying to say. Nobody came over to bother him. He was, however, in a wheelchair because that's why he had the good severance package. Something went wrong at the postal service, the office. Something went terribly wrong, meaning he was in need of medical aid because he was bleeding all over the place at the last day of his work. Wasn't quite pensionate age yet. He was like in his early 50s, so he wasn't quite ready to retire, but still he got a severance package because the accident had caused him to lose so much functionality, I guess you could say. That's a bit of a cool word to use, but still it was not very useful for the postal service, so they sent him home with a good severance package and he lived like a king at the top of his tower. So that's that. He had a pet owl, which liked to go out and grab mice for him, which it wouldn't kill. It's because he collected mice. This guy did. The king collects mice. But one day the owl, very strong creature as it was, managed to bring back a tiger. It wasn't like a full tiger, it's like a cub. It looked a bit small for its breed, I guess, but it was still a tiger nonetheless. Anyway, so after a while he was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I guess I've collected mice. I can feed him mice to make him grow bigger. And so he did. The tiger got fed mice, and eventually he grew a lot bigger. Of course, he had to figure it out by searching the internet, like how to raise tigers and all that sort of thing, and also how to train them naturally. That's very important. But after a while, the tiger started to, it hit its teenage years, and tigers, when they want to figure out what the pecking order is, They start doing all these little things that you might not notice right away if you weren't a tiger, but he was basically challenging this guy's dominance. That's what he was doing. Kind of like Siegfried and Roy, that happened with them, right? You saw that video where one of the tigers snaps his leg, and if he doesn't respond, that means you're too weak to lead, I'm gonna take over. And that's exactly what this tiger was thinking. And he was like, I'm gonna fight you. And of course, whatever his name was, it didn't give him a name, the postal worker Pete, he of course couldn't fight back because he was already in need of medication and he was in a wheelchair, so it was basically the end of him. Unfortunately, so now the tiger had the entire top floor to himself, but not for very long, of course, because he ran out of mice pretty quickly, and the owl wasn't much food either, so eventually he starved to death. Either way, our postal worker found himself at the river Styx. No particular reason, because he hadn't exactly done anything bad, but he hadn't done anything good either. So if you're living a very neutral life, I suppose even then in this world you would go down to Hades. And of course he paid the 2 cents to get across the river because swimming was not an option, and I don't know if you know anything about the river Styx, but that is not a fun place to swim. So he went to Hades, and that was the end of our poor postal worker. So not only did he have a terrible accident that rendered him unable to work, but also after living a few years as a king, which was fun I suppose, put this up front, there wasn't much else for him in life other than the owl, which also got eaten by the tiger, which was dead. So that was the story of our very rich, or somewhat rich postal worker with his entire floor of the top of the building. That's story number 2. I hope you enjoyed that as well. I'm going to go grab these, put these aside to grab the next 9. Oops, touching things here that I don't need to touch. And here comes the rest of them. This is 5 more dice. Oh, our squid is back. And this is 4 dice. There you go. And once again, this guy is back. I don't know if we're going to get him, but who knows. We tend to get him whenever it's possible. Let's see now. Oops, there's a black cat. One over here, and there's an acorn over there, and there's a bubbling cauldron. So far it's a witch story. And there's a monkey. Okay, we're doing good. Next, it's going to be a very mythical story, I think. There we go. This looks like somebody with a flag in space or in the snow. It could be either. And this is a book. Oops. This is a clown. Whether it's good or evil, we don't know yet. There he is. It's our Minotaur friend, and we have a bunch of towers. So, pause the video here to take a look at these dice and make up your own story. Make sure to post it in the comments below, just like the other 2. And I'm going to see what I'm going to make out of this incredible nonsense. Let's see now. Once upon a time, there was someone who found a land all to himself somewhere in Siberia, which hadn't been claimed yet, even though it was called Siberia already. It was kind of difficult to find because it was across a whole bunch of mountains and different valleys that nobody had ever heard of before, fraught with peril and acorns. There you go. And then when he got there, eventually he managed to build himself a little town out of towers, which he had always liked. His entire town consisted of spires, because why not? One day he found himself a book, and it was a very interesting book because it talked about potions and recipes and all that sort of thing, and he was like, okay, I'm the only one here. I guess nobody would mind if I were to brew a few potions, and some of those potions also were for summoning creatures. So he tried his hand at summoning things, and eventually he managed to summon a monkey, whom he sent out to go fetch somebody else to live in his town because he was getting a little lonely. First thing the monkey fetched was a cat, which was somewhere nearby. Cats are usually found all over the place, and this one's kind of emaciated. It had been living in a nearby valley for many years without actually having seen a soul. So he took care of the cat, this guy did, and sent his monkey out to go find somebody else because he could talk to the cat, but the cat wasn't going to talk back. So eventually the monkey came back with a clown, who was, at least he could talk back, but he wasn't very entertaining. At least this guy had always feared and hated clowns. So they agreed that the clown would live in one set of the towers and he would live in the other, so they wouldn't have to see each other. Meanwhile, he continued brewing, and he managed to basically take the cat and an acorn, because that's what the recipe said, this one. And he wanted to brew himself a nice set of cattle so he could have some more extra food, because he was only growing like like, I don't know, different types of crops that he was able to grow by hand, and not too much, because he only didn't have any equipment with him to grow more than just like a small field of things. So it wasn't a lot of food. He was hoping to get some cattle in. If he could get that spell right, he would get some cows, and then he would have some beef and some milk, so he could make dairy and all that sort of good stuff. So we spent some night brewing this potion. It took about a day. Some of these potions take a long time to make, and after a while there was a poof, and suddenly appeared a minotaur, which was not quite what he had in mind. So this guy went to the clown over here and is like, okay, hey, I kind of like these towers, and maybe you like the other towers as well. Why don't we switch places? I mean, there's nothing going on or anything like that. And the clown was like, okay, I guess I'm kind of done with this side of town. I'd like to see the other one with the smaller towers, which are more colorful. They sound like more fun. So he went to the other side of town and was never heard from again. And this guy decided to leave eventually, because now we had a town with a dead clown in it somewhere and an evil minotaur running around destroying things, and he didn't like it. So he went off and tried to find a new place to settle down, and he brought the cat along. Or did he use the cat to summon something else? I've forgotten what he did what he did with the cat. Oh yeah, he used that with the acorn. Well, he summoned a new cat then, okay? He came across a new cat and brought that along to a whole new world to start a new town. And that was the end of that, though he did write something in his journal to warn people of the Minotaur. And nobody actually ever went there anyway, because nobody could find the place. So it was kind of safe, and someday perhaps somebody will run across it, and then they will have some problems. Anyways, that was the story of a brave adventurer building towns and sending clowns into the area with Minotaurs to be sacrificed. That was my set of stories. I hope you had a good set of stories to share as well. Make sure to post them in the comments below. Once again, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye for now.